was first approached to do the documentary, I was a little apprehensive, obviously being a former police officer. And they said, well, why don't you just take a meeting and see if you guys, can get on the same page. And when I spoke to him, I told him if we were to move forward with this, it could not, under any circumstance, be a puff piece. And, there might be people calling you a scumbag, a piece of shit, as well as people saying you deserve a second chance. And he was okay with that. So once I found out he was okay with it and it wasn't going to be a puff piece, I decided, I think it would be a good idea doing my due diligence on what actually happened. Once we decided to move forward, I really dug in and did my due diligence on the case and realized that a lot of stuff that I perceived was through tabloids and a newspaper, and a lot of other people had the same perception. So basically, it's my job, and hopefully when you leave here, you have an opinion of either way, that he either deserves a second chance or he got out because he is who he is.
How you doing? My name is Lilo. I'm an addict.
Hey, Lilo.
I went from the kid in, the Bronx Tale, rising star from the neighborhood, starring in a, classic movie, to, to a junkie.
5 a.m., December 10th, 2005. Off-duty New York police officer Daniel Enchautegi responded to what sounded like a break-in at a neighbor's home. The burglary erupted into a gunfight with Brancato and his accomplice.
Obviously, the police officer is dead. He was villainized in the press immediately.
We all remember Lilo Brancato. He was such a rising star. Acted with De Niro, James Gandolfini, but his career came to a screeching halt one night when he was involved in a crime that ended with a police officer's death.
So Lilo, tell me about how it was growing up in Yonkers, about your childhood, your family and all that stuff.
We were very middle class, blue collar family. It was a very tight knit community. It was all Italian. It was all Italians, with the exception of my next door neighbor, which was Puerto Rican, but pretty much it was all Italian. There was a lot going on in the streets. We were playing stickball, football, a lot of that going on. Parents yelling from the window to get inside. And so it was a really, really good childhood. A lot of great memories from my childhood.
Was there any type of drug use back then? Not with you, did you ever get witness to any of that stuff, or was that even a thought, or?
Absolutely not. Absolutely. I mean, you would hear about things, in cautionary things, cautionary stuff in school, right. About drugs, but that's something that wasn't really prevalent in my life or something that I ever, witnessed. So I really never paid attention to it, only until later on in my life when it, the opportunity to do drugs started presenting itself.
You're on Jones Beach one day, with your brother and.
Yeah, bro, it was maybe 10, 15 of us.
And what happened?
It was the day after 4th of July, July 5th, 1992. And, we just decided, let's go to the beach tomorrow. And we used to go out to Jones Beach, Field 4. And that's, that's a drive. From Yonkers with traffic, it could take you an hour to get out there, sometimes even more. So we went out there, we just went out, school just ended. So this is beginning, summer vacation. And little did I know that day on the beach was gonna totally change my life. Now, I had heard about the Bronx Tale, and I heard that there was open call auditions, and that they were looking for, someone with no previous acting experience to play Robert De Niro's son in a film called A Bronx Tale, which Robert De Niro would make his directorial debut. And, to go back what I was just saying, I thought in my mind, I said, that would be pretty interesting, being that people tell me that I look like him. I said, but nah, there's no way I'll ever be in a movie. I mean, it's a movie, on the big screen. What a long shot, middle class, blue collar family. That just doesn't happen every day. And I hear my brother screaming, and I didn't know, I didn't know what happened. So I run out of the water, and my brother said, hey, Lee, remember that movie we heard about, that Robert De Niro movie? Well, this guy's, he's out here right now, he's out here on the beach today looking for kids to play the part, and I told him that you look like him. And the guy's name is Marco Greco, and my brother said, and the guy said, he told my brother, he said, you're right, he does look like him. And I just kind of rose to the occasion. I knew this was my shot. So he didn't have to ask me to do anything. I just started doing the face and the whole thing, and are you talking to me? And the guy was like, oh wow, this guy's great. I love this guy. So he said, it was a Sunday, July 5th. He said, usually, we're closed at the Belmont Playhouse. He said, usually we're closed today. He goes, but I like you. He goes, can you meet me in the Bronx tonight at this time? And for some reason, I just knew. I knew on the ride home from the beach, I just knew that something was gonna happen from this situation. I went home, I told my mom, it was my next door neighbor's birthday, my aunts were there, and her son read for the part, and she was like, oh, so-and-so read for the part, you're not gonna get it. They've got so many kids reading, and it's a big. So I said, well, I can only try, right? So I went in that night, my two friends drove me down there, and the guy Marco was there. And I'd never seen anything on, in the screenplay form, the guy just gave me a scene. And he said, have you ever done this before? And I said, no, I've never done this before. And he said, well, here's the scene. Just, read it, see what it is, and, I'll come back in a little bit, let me know when you're ready, and we'll read it. Right. And I remember just looking at it, and it just looked like something that was familiar to me and something that I would possibly be capable of doing. It was the bathroom scene when I'm shaving. In the original script, De Niro's shaving. And I asked him, Dad, let me ask you a question about the interracial dating, what his thoughts were on that and the whole thing. And that was the audition scene. And I read it, and I just knew what to do. It just seemed like it came naturally to me. And I told the guy, Marco, I'm ready. And I read it, and the guy was blown away. He was like, wow, that was great. He said, that was the best that anyone has ever read it. And then, he started asking me to do other scenes. He said, oh, well, why don't we try this scene and do this scene? And the character in the movie's name was Calogero, and my father's Sicilian, and so was the character. My father is from the province of Agrigento in Sicily, in a little town called Naro. And in Italy, you have a lot of these little towns that have saints that come from that town. Right. The saint from my father's town was San Calogero. And my father even went to the reform school, San Calo. They used to shorten it. But, it just felt like that part, that role in that movie was just meant for me.
Right, it was all lined up.
Yeah, it was just all the stars aligned. Right. And the guy was like, wow, man. He was like, that was great. And then, we exchanged numbers, and he said, right before I left, he said, call me in about a week, call me in about a week or so, and I'll tell you how you did. And when he said a week, that seemed kind of distant. Maybe I thought, maybe he didn't like me as much as I thought he liked me. I was working for a lawyer at the time. It was my summer vacation, summer job. I was filing. My father's a builder. The lawyer did the closings for my father. So he was a family friend. And he took on a summer job at his office. I used to file stuff and answer phones. And I came home from work that day. And some woman had called on the phone. She seemed very professional. And when I heard her voice, she asked for Lilo, and that's also my father's name. And she said, can I please speak to Lilo Brancato? And I said, yeah, hold on, I'll get my dad for you. And she said, are you Lilo? And I said, yeah. She goes, no, I think I want to speak with you. She said, I'm so-and-so, I work in, down in Tribeca Casting, and, we saw your tape, and we loved it. We want to meet you, and we would like for you to come down. And I was like, wow, Now it started becoming real. The next day I went down there with my father and my uncle, and was very overwhelmed. Because, like when I go down there, like I said, I've never done this before. I've never been to an audition. I don't know the whole process. I'm not familiar with any of this. So when I went down there, my father and uncle walked in the room with me, and there was like 40 kids there reading for the part. And you got kids like, in the corner, like reading their lines, talking to the wall, like real actors, like guys that like really want to do this. And I was like so intimidated and so overwhelmed by the whole thing. But, I just figured they liked what I did, so I'm not going to change what I did. I'm just going to keep going in that direction. Obviously, they liked me. I made it to this point. So I went in and I read. They liked me again. They said, listen, can you come back tomorrow? And I kept getting a call back. And as that happened, I noticed that there was a lot less kids in the room. And at that point, everyone was introduced to me on, first name basis. And then one day they said, we're going to go upstairs and meet Bob. And I had already met Chaz Palminteri see him, in the building, and he would always congratulate me and say, thank you for coming down. We really love what you're doing. Just keep it up. And very inspiring stuff. And then they said, we're going to go upstairs and meet Bob. And I said, okay. I just thought Bob was maybe, a script supervisor or someone. I didn't know who it was. So the way it was set up, I come in through the door back there. I'm De Niro. He's got his back to me, and Chaz is right there. So I can see Chaz. I can see his profile, and then he looked over. And they said, they said, the door's a little open. Just opened and said, Bob, Lilo's here to meet you. And Robert, turned around, and I remember he walked over. Like, you can't explain that moment in words. And just like when he came up to me, and I remember he had just finished doing the movie Mad Dog and Glory. So he had that that reddish hair that he had. So it wasn't like, De Niro that I knew from seeing on TV, but it was still De Niro. That's still the face.
I hope they're not fooled by his fame. He's an actor. He's acting on that stand.
What was the first initial reaction with other cops and guys you worked with when the story broke the next morning?
It was anger, frustration, sorrow.
Today, if you mentioned Lilo Brancato's name to other cops, what would be the reaction?
I think most cops would be hate.
Right.
Most cops would be just flat out hate. It's just really one of those unfortunate things that can happen. Life can be very simple, but somehow us grown-ups, we can complicate things. Mm-hmm. And that was the product of something that just should never have happened.
What do you think Pat would, what do you think his reaction would be to this?
Pat would love his head on the platter.
Right.
It's especially Pat Lynch, he can be very animated and he's pro-cop to the max, and that's what you want in somebody that's going to represent you. But, even cops screw up.
Right.
And there's cops that have hit bottom, whether it be alcohol or drugs. And he's human. This is one of the flaws of being human.
So police officer to police officer, why did you think it was important to come on and do this documentary?
Because the young police officer that lost his life did something that I think any other police officer would have done. And it's unfortunate. Lilo Brancato is out and living his life and still can do things, and the young officer is not.
The night, actually it was in the morning when it happened. It was around 5:20 a.m. I was in my crime scene office. We received a phone call that an officer had been shot and he was likely to die. When I got there, the scene was, there was a lot of cops around the peripheral because there was, the incident happened in the middle of the block, mm-hmm. and it went up towards Westchester Avenue. Mm-hmm. So there were a lot of cops around the peripheral of the scene. They had it marked off. And the cops actually did a great job in preserving the scene because there was a lot of snow on the ground. Mm. If you were in Daniel's apartment, you could look right out of he lived in the basement. You could look right out of his window and you could see the window where Brancato and Armento tried to get in and they broke the window. It was directly across, he had a clear view. And he actually went outside and went to approach them in the driveway. So initially, you don't know exactly how it went down because Armento was removed. Him and Brancato ran towards Westchester Avenue. And they both left a blood trail. Because Daniel actually hit them with every shot that he fired. He hit the both of them with every shot. He didn't miss them. So a couple of the bullets and fragments actually came out. Now, they both left separate blood trails going down towards Westchester. Lilo actually made it to the vehicle that was, I believe it was a Durango. It was on the corner, parked right around the corner on Westchester, and there was blood all over it. And that's where the officers had grabbed him. Mm-hmm. Armento was short of that. He dumped his gun right where he was in the cops, where the cops grabbed him. They were wearing really thin rubber gloves. I mean, you don't even see cheap gloves like that anymore in the emergency room. These were really, really cheap rubber gloves. And there was a couple of them over there where Armento was caught. And there was one back at the windowsill where they tried to get in. And that's where we got Lilo's DNA from that particular glove. It'd be hard to get into the jury's mind. Right. I don't know. It might have come down to how the judge explained the law to them, that they didn't find him guilty. Right. But they found him guilty. I was satisfied that at least they found him guilty of the burglary, and he did do some time. Right. So hopefully he had time to reflect upon the people you hang out with. Right. So I wrote on December 10th, 2005, the assigned being me, along with Police Officer D'Amato. I was training him at the time. Responded to 3117 Arnold Place to assist Detective Schwartz with his shield number of the Bronx Homicide Squad and the Department investigation of a police-involved shooting in which an off-duty MOS and 2 perpetrators exchanged gunfire. The off-duty MOS was removed to Jacoby Hospital prior to CSU arrival, where he expired from his wound. He was shot once in the chest. The perpetrators were also removed to Jacoby prior to my arrival and were reportedly in critical condition. And then I will describe all the services that I provide in terms of collecting the evidence. I think the fact that he was who he was, you know, it might have had an effect on the jury. Might have had an effect on the way the whole case went. It's the same thing if you're in a car, somebody has a gun. If the police come and stop you, if they pull you out and you have the gun on you, the only person who will get charged is the person with the gun on them. But if that person throws the gun down the floor, now everybody goes. Right. It's the same with narcotics, guns. Right. So being that he was involved in the burglary and a police officer was killed, he should have been charged. And that's the law.
It took me a while to decide to go forward in a case like this. I mean, so emotionally charged. You know, obviously a police officer is dead. He was villainized in the press immediately, made to be a monster. I have an astounding amount of respect for police officers. I've represented, as you know, a lot of police officers in some very difficult times, and I you know, pride myself in helping out members of the force, you know, when they need me. This was obviously a difficult decision for me to make, but it was a decision that I was able to make pretty comfortably once I got to know Lilo and once I got to know the facts of this case.
Sure. And what was your first impression of Lilo when you met him?
A sweetheart, really a sweetheart of a guy. Not the guy I'd read about, not the arrogant, you know, sort of abusive individual who was callous or anything like that. He was a sweetheart who clearly had lost control of his life. Lost control of his life in the sense that drugs began to overwhelm him, take away the person that he was, that made him so successful as a young boy, make him so loved by so many people. A lot of people really love Lilo Brancato. A lot of people care about Lilo Brancato, and that's why I think this was so shocking to so many people. But as an individual, as a person, you know, look, I was a prosecutor. I've been defense lawyer for a long time. You know, I like to not judge people based on Google searches, not judge people based on third-party analysis, but on my own impressions. And I had some tough questions for him when I first met him, but it was clear to me that there was a good soul inside that sort of hardened shell that had been eroded by years of drug abuse. After that case was resolved, I still represented many cops in their times of need, including the so-called infamous rape cops in New York who were acquitted of rape after being vilified for 2 years in the press as rapists. And you know, the funny part about that is the same people who were giving me a hard time during the Brancato case were the first ones to call me after the rape cop acquittal and tell me how much I've done for the boys in blue and how much they appreciated my help. So, but that's all part of being a lawyer. I don't take it personally. Once I got to know about the facts of the case and the person, Lilo, it was clear to me that this was an individual who had no legal responsibility or moral responsibility for the death of that police officer, as tragic as it was. Another individual did, and he's rightfully serving the rest of his life in jail. That's Armento.
A lot of people don't realize that that house was his buddy's house.
And that's important to know. He wasn't randomly going around the neighborhood trying to break into a home. I mean, this was Kenny's house, his buddy who had died just recently, but Lilo didn't know it, but he had been there hundreds of times before, where Kenny supplied him with narcotics to get his fix. He went there with Armento that night, and when he went there, they made sufficient amount of noise where it startled and awakened the neighbor, who happened to be a New York City police officer. Of course, Lilo didn't know that. Lilo didn't know Steve Armento was carrying a gun. That was proven in the trial. You know, the police officer fired first, and Armento returned fire, and all of this was obviously a great surprise to Brancato, who was there to do what he'd done 100 times before. So there was no legal liability. I mean, it's easy to lump him together with another individual when a police officer shot. That's our instinct as a civilized society, and it's right in that sense to have a visceral reaction like that, because if a police officer dies, if anyone dies, it's a tragedy. But someone who gave their life to serve the community, as police officers often do, it really creates a righteous sense of indignation and outrage. That's a good visceral reaction, but we as also a civilized society have to step back and look at the true facts. And when I did in this case, and when that jury did in this case, they came to the only right conclusion, which was Lilo Brancato wasn't responsible for this police officer's death.
2005, when the whole incident happened, you had the uniqueness of interviewing Lilo's family, and you got to speak to his mom. And what was that whole thing like?
Well, I think about the climate at the time.
Right.
As a journalist, I remember, first of all, when he got arrested. And it was a few months before. It was in June 2005 when he was arrested for an uncontrolled substance. And I remember that made a lot of headlines, because anytime...
What were your thoughts on that, if you don't mind me asking?
At the time, I remember thinking, I knew who he was. He was certainly someone who had a great background. He was a New Yorker, you know, he was from Yonkers. And I just remember hearing that, oh, here's this guy, he got into drug problems. He's probably another celebrity with drug problems. We've done many interviews like that. And then when I found out what happened in December 2005, it was shocking. But to be suddenly charged with murder and also charged with robbery was something very, very serious. And then it became not just another celebrity caught up in drugs, it became something very, very serious, and it was making headlines everywhere.
Now, how did it come to pass that you got to, months later, interview Lilo's mom, and how that whole thing transpired?
I knew Mel Sachs, and Mel Sachs was the attorney at the time, and knew Mel very well. I had interviewed him many times, interviewed many of his clients through the years. He was probably, you know, if not the best or one of the best for sure, criminal defense attorneys in the country, not just in New York. And Mel and I had a number of discussions, and he reached out to me and said, I would like to give an exclusive to you with Lilo Brancato's mother. And I thought, wow, I'll take it. It was interesting as a journalist, because here I was interviewing her, and I was looking right across from her, and you could tell that this was a woman who was clearly heartbroken, who was so devastated. I thought she put a really human face on Lilo Brancato for the public. Our interview was shown all over the world. So many people saw that interview. And the mother, I thought, was very heartfelt, very compassionate, and you couldn't help but feel heartbroken for the mother. I remember her saying to me, my son got a call, was going off to a Christmas party, and then I didn't see him again. And you could just tell that this was this mother who just loved her son. She adopted him when he was a young boy, really cared for him, and knew he got mixed up in drugs, but was just, you know, shocked, shell-shocked by everything that was happening. Clearly, he has paid his dues. I hope he uses this time also to inspire other children not to take the wrong path, not to get mixed up in drugs. And I also hope that he uses the time to also honor law enforcement too, because I think he can have a powerful message and inspire other kids. And he's also a great actor. I admired his acting back then. And I think he's, you know, you always want the best for someone. You want someone to have another chance. And maybe there's an Academy Award in his future. You never know.
It was one day Robert De Niro said to me, he said, Lilo, tomorrow I want you to dress like you're going to church. Wear a collared shirt, And, you know, I want you to dress, you know, I want you to dress nice. He said, we're gonna do what's called a screen test. Now, I didn't know what that was, but, you know, he said, we're gonna do a screen test. What we're gonna do is we're gonna actually put you on film, because film may make you look different, it may make you look, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I said, yeah, no problem. I remember I wore black slacks, button-down, white button-down shirt, black shoes. And, you know, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. You know, at this point in time, I thought, you know, I'm C. So I'm just sitting there, I'm so nervous. I'm just sitting there. I got my father sitting next to me. And then I feel someone tap my shoulder. And I look, I said, hey, how you doing, man? And he said to me, he said, hey, how are you? He goes, I'm Phil Garbarino. He says, I'm reading for C also. He goes, it's me and you. When he told me that, I was like, oh, wow. I guess I'm not the only guy. And I know he got to this point because he was good also. Right. There was something that got him to this point. Right. Phil Garbarino was the kid who shot Sonny at the end of the movie. Right. Initially, they were gonna make him C, and he was 21, so the movie would have been a little different. It would have been him at 21 and his friends would have been around that age also, so they would have been a little older. Who, by the way, is still a very good friend of mine to this day, Phil. I remember we did the scene when Sonny let me borrow his car, and when I gave it back to him, he found something under the engine, under the hood, that he thought I planted in his car. And, you know, he got physical with me and wanted to know, you know, where did you go with my car? And I begged and pleaded, Sonny, I'm sorry, I didn't do anything. I'm telling you, I just went to pick up the girl. That was the scene. So Phil read the scene first. Had the doors closed. All I can do was hear him. Me and my father were right outside. And all you hear is, Chaz, where the fuck did you go with my car? And you hear slap, slap. You can hear him slapping this poor guy. He's slapping the crap out of him. What did I sign up for here, you know? Because I'm thinking after he's done, I gotta go in there and he's gonna beat me up the same way. So Phil came out, I mean, he was all disheveled, his hair was messed up, his shirt was ripped, he had handprints on his face. So I'm like, wow, bro, they really worked, you know, they worked him over. So I'm like, all right, you know, so I'm like, even like nervous. Now I'm nervous and I'm gonna get a beating on top of being nervous. So I go in there and, you know, cameras roll and we did the scene. And they didn't put their hands on me once. So all weekend I didn't hear anything, and I remember it was a Sunday night. This lady, Robin, called me and said, Lilo, Bob would like to see you tomorrow. I said, okay. And I knew this was gonna be the day. My life was gonna change in one way or another. So I went down there with my father. Robert De Niro, his office was on the 8th floor. We used to go to the 7th floor. The 8th floor, you needed the key, but he had like a balcony where he could look down. So now, he would come out, he knew my father at this point, and he's such a polite guy, you know, Robert De Niro. He used to call my father Mr. Brancato, and he said, hey, how you doing, Mr. Brancato? You know, they used to speak in Italian and everything. They were right around the same age also, you know? So, you know, he said hello to my father, and he said, Lilo, come up. So I go upstairs, and you got Chaz, and you got De Niro, and De Niro's, you know, he's just looking at me, and he's making his faces, and he says, well, you know, we liked very much what you did, you know. Now, that was ambiguous. Right. It could have been, we liked very much what you did, but, you know, right. He said, we liked very much what you did, and you got the part. Thank you, Bobby, you know, thank you. I said to Chaz, thank you so much. I said, is it okay if I go tell my father? And when I went to tell my father, he came outside with me to the balcony, he had his arm around me. And I told my father, I said, Pop, I said, I got the part. And my father just looked up, went like that. And I said, you mind if I use your phone? I'd like to call my mother. And Robert De Niro said, yeah, go ahead. He said, go use the one in the bathroom, you have a little privacy. So I went, I called my mother, and you know, I heard my mother screaming, my aunts were there, everybody all going crazy. He got the part, everybody's going crazy. You know, because my mom, you know, she told everybody, my whole street, everybody was outside. There was balloons and people whistling, Lilo, congratulations. And I'm thinking to myself, like, could life get any better than this? It was like perfect, man. It was like living a dream.
Biggie said it best, more money, more problems. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know, once you start to get in that money and the fame and things are coming at you real fast, you got to keep up.
Right.
And sometimes trying to keep up, you might fall. Yeah, we had access to everything.
Right.
We was on Def Jam. We was rolling with Rush.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, they gave us everything we wanted, you know what I'm saying? To the models, the club life. You know, even before I even met Jay, you know what I'm saying? I was always going to the clubs and going to joints like Mars and, you know, underground clubs where hip-hop kids weren't even allowed in, you know what I'm saying? So I was always dibbling dabbling in certain crowds, but it's always there in New York City. Like, it's not hard to find.
I met Lilo in Italy, in Milan, Italy, I think, I used to do a little bit of print work, and he did some print work as well. And so I met him backstage at a fashion show. And then I met him again in New York City, and we used to hang around in the clubs a little bit. And, you know, he was a good dude. I've never actually seen him get crazy. I mean, he was just one of the most amiable, just very relaxed, authentic people you want to meet. You know, he was just one of those kind of guys that, you know, you have an instant liking to him. You know, you can understand why they cast him in the film, you know, because he was very, you know, he was likable. Right. He is likable. I was completely taken back because it was so unlike him. You know, and when I heard more details about the story, then I started to understand how, you know, someone like Lilo could have found himself in that situation. You know what I mean? Right. And sort of guilty by osmosis or whatever it is, you know what I mean? Sure. But, so, you know, I was surprised. Celebrity it hijacks the human ego, and it gives people a sense of hubris where they just feel that they are untouchable and, you know, this can't happen to me.
How you doing? My name is Lilo. I'm an addict.
Hey, Lilo.
Paulie, thank you for sharing. You know, I know today's topic is hope, and you know, back before I ever came into these rooms, I didn't think there was any hope, just because of the, you know, the negative stigma attached to drug addiction, and you don't want to, you know, really tell anyone, you know, you can't really go anywhere for help because everyone's gonna look at you like you're a, you know, a piece of shit, you know, a piece of garbage. And I didn't want to really let anyone know, and as a result of that, I just kept getting deeper and deeper in my addiction. To the point where I was totally powerless. You know, there was nothing I could do in my power to stop. I mean, it felt like there was a magnet in my mouth pulling the drugs. And, you know, as Mike said, you know, I went away for some time also. And it's because, you know, of my lack of self-control when it came to, you know, drugs. And then, you know, when I got out of prison, I started coming to meetings, something that I never really did unless I was like forced to do because of some case I had or whatever. And when I first started coming to meetings, I, you know, the word hope was like the word that, you know, first came to mind because, you know, everyone was so welcoming and, giving me the phone numbers. And now it's like you have something behind you, you have a support system to fall back on if you ever, you know, in a situation where you feel like you want to use. And I thank the people in these rooms so much, you know, because if it wasn't and weren't for these rooms, I don't know where I'd be. You know, so yeah, thank you. I mean, these really saved my life.
There's nothing worse than wasted fucking talent. You had this opportunity of a lifetime to become who you are right now. I would have done anything to work with Abel Ferrara. Like, I don't have to ever work again after this. That's the way I felt. The way I saw it was, I was still young, you know, so I was like, God, I lost my right to party. I lost my right to have a good time, to be young, because I fucked with that drug. Like, that drug was just, then all bets are off after that. You can't do anything anymore. Now you have to get sober, and you got to stay sober for the rest of your life. You don't even have to be an addict to become a heroin addict. You just have to take heroin 5 times, and then you realize you don't know how to tie your shoes after your 5th time without it. At least for me, that's how it was. I don't know if I was an addict or if it made me an addict. I don't even know. But I knew that it was the beginning for him. All I know is Abel Ferrara.
Right.
had a massive drug problem. He used to direct on his hands and knees, Abel. And hey, I want you to do this. And he'd be petting his hair and stuff. And I remember even Lilo was like, what the fuck is this? Right. What, how are we gonna get anything done here? Right. By the 6th day of shooting, I noticed that Lilo was not the same kid that started the movie with us. I remember we had one scene in a horse and carriage in Central Park, and we were stealing shots because we were shooting wintertime. We were shooting like snowstorms and blizzards in wintertime for. We were in a heat wave in New York. It was that really big heat wave, and this fucking guy is puking off the side of the horse and carriage the whole time, and I'm like, "What's going on? Are you sick? What's happening?" And it took me a couple of minutes to realize, I was like, this kid's doing heroin. He's doing drugs. He's fucking high as hell right now. He's not withdrawing because he's not a junkie yet. Right. He just got high. He's new at taking heroin because I had been already out of rehab and stuff and sober for a few years. And I was like, wow, so he's just starting. So I thought for sure he was getting high with Abel. I was annoyed. I was really mad at him. I think I was more mad at the situation because I knew how hard it was for me. And I'm like, don't go down this road. Right. Like, you have all this opportunity in front of you. Why would you ever do this? Like, I was still pretty fresh. So, and then you're watching Abel and it's like, this is what you want to be? This isn't like I'm a party animal, I'm a Hollywood actor, I've just become famous, I want to go out and party and enjoy the high life. This is, you must really hate yourself. Brad Renfro died right out of Deuces Wild. That was around the same time period, I think, that Lilo got in trouble. So now you have these two really talented, and Brad Renfro was this gentle soul, you know, a mess, you know. It's so sad. And Lilo and I reconnected this year, the reason why I'm even here talking to this camera, because I asked him if he would fill in for me along with a couple of other friends of mine who who had jail time and came out on the other end and are trying to keep their lives in the straight and narrow and trying to help people. But that's when I reached out to Lilo and I said, will you go talk at this conference? So, you know, my whole take on all of this stuff, as much as it was awful and there's all this wasted talent, is that he's turning it around. So is it wasted at this point? And he's taking this experience and he's turning it into something that could help other people and something that's going to work in his favor, I hope. Put him on a different path. I always tell, you know, I asked him to go speak at this thing, which was it's a reentry program. People coming out of jail, not kids, just people coming out of jail and not having a chance. Once they're scarred for life by that. So what are their options? Like, you know, let me just go get fucking high again. Like, I can't even be a part of society now because I fucked up. You know, I see it a different way. I see a lot of people who had drug problems as being highly sensitive people. People who forget about even their problems. It's how you carry your problems and how you handle them. And people like us handle them in this very self-destructive kind of way. But you can turn that into something magical. I believe that. I really believe that.
You finished?
Thank you, T.
Cause that sugarless motherfucker, the last fucking drink you're ever gonna have.
God, Bobby!
There was speculation and rumors that James Gandolfini actually took you to the side on the side of Sopranos and gave you some words of wisdom, some advice. Can you elaborate on what that was?
Basically just told me that you have something really good going for yourself. Being given the opportunity to be in such TV shows and films, it's a blessing. And, you know, you should be really careful in the decisions that you make in the life that you live, to not squander this. And, you know, I guess since back then I hadn't reached that moment of clarity, I kind of brushed off what he said. And I shouldn't have. But, you know, now that I can look back in hindsight, you know, wow, you know, that was some pretty great advice and, you know, from a legend.
I met Lilo when he was shooting Renaissance Man through Mark Wahlberg, who was a friend of mine. I met with him and Randy Emmett, who introduced me to him.
And how'd you guys become tight?
Me and Lilo were tight from the beginning. We just were naturally became friends, had a lot of similar interests, and we just, I always found him a very interesting guy to talk to. He always had very interesting commentary, especially about acting and stuff. It was interesting. The first year he was in prison, he was just as messed up as he was before. And I was really angry at him. And we had a lot of conversations where I really, really, we had some tough conversations where because as much as I'm his friend, as much as I wanted to be there for him as a friend, I was very angry because, a cop lost their life. I knew he didn't shoot the guy. I knew he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but he's still responsible for being there. I always knew, I was always afraid Lilo was gonna hurt himself. I thought he was gonna die. I mean, I knew he was gonna die if he didn't stop. And I kept telling him that, and I did everything in my power to convince him that, he's on a road where he's going to die. So I always expected that. I never expected him to hurt somebody else. That was the shocking thing. And of course, when the truth came out, he certainly didn't hurt anyone else. He was there. But even being there was upsetting for me, and I was very disappointed in him. I love the guy as an old friend, but someone losing their life, a police officer, it's heartbreaking, and I was very angry at him when it first happened.
What was the reaction from friends and family that knew you were close with him after the incident happened?
Most of my friends called me and said, "You got to get away from this guy. He's going to be nothing but trouble for you." Some people put a lot of pressure on me to get away from some of my family and a lot of other people. He really was a pariah. But the way I look at it, he's my friend, and he was my friend when he was a movie star. He's still gonna be my friend when he's in his worst point of his life. That's what friends are for, and I wouldn't have left him. As a friend, I would never leave him.
Did you lose friends because of him?
I did lose some friends because of him.
Did you lose family members because of him?
Yes.
How did I meet Lilo? Just with the Rat Pack we used to run with in the city. Lilo was the hottest young actor on the scene right then, and running with our little A-listers. Here comes Lilo out of nowhere in the Bronx Tale and just took New York by storm, and met him down in Scores. Okay. Gentlemen's Club also. And one day he was like, "Hey, you want to give me a ride home?" I said, "Nah, man, I've been drinking, but here goes my car keys." And he took the car keys and he went, a brand new 600 Mercedes, young 18-year-old kid, and we bonded right after that. Lilo was two different people. See, we have a disease that tells us we don't have a disease. So when Lilo was sober, Lilo was the best person in the world. When Lilo was getting high, then Lilo was a whole different person. And I could tell you stories with when we'd be in a hotel room and have a bunch of women and you're partying, and Lilo will start doing drugs, and you could just see the demon just taking Lilo off. Not where he's violent, but when paranoia was sit in.
Between you and I, bro, I see how sick you were and how sick I was. We gotta keep each other accountable, Well, I love you, man.
I think that, but I think also if I didn't go out that night, my life wouldn't have been saved,
Right, but, we wouldn't have cost $2, And we gotta look at it well. And, we talk about this all the time, on the phone, and doing devotionals and stuff. We know it's not all about us. It's, we ain't self-centered about it no more. If we can take this all back and bring back our victims, we definitely will. All we can do right now is we apologize, we're sorry, and God is not a God of second chance. He's a God of another chance, because we've been through our second chances.
Right.
And just hope our family and their family be patient with us and know that we're sick.
When Lilo did cocaine, he would take a picture off the wall, look for a microphone, look for a camera, go under the bed, go everywhere, just like you never seen before. It's almost like he was allergic to cocaine. And nobody on the party scene had it worse than Lilo. I could tell you this. We had a function at my house for charity. And Lilo, during the day, sober, great human being, a lot of energy. a lot of compassion, a lot of empathy toward the foundation and toward the people. People loved him. And then as the night went on, he started drinking, and the cocaine would come in. Lilo right away going to something else. It was so bad that I had a large house right out in this area, and I came home maybe 3 days after the function, went into a bedroom downstairs. We had a big place, 16 bedrooms. I don't know why I went down there. I opened up the closet to get something. I don't know why I was down in that closet. I opened it up, and Lilo was still here.
How many years sober are you?
Oh, I can proudly say that on this past November 18th, 2017, I celebrated 11 years.
How's that feel?
Feels tremendous. I mean, it's not something I can say that gets easier every day, but it gets more rewarding every day. You know, while I was away, one of the best things that I learned is how to manage my emotions. And what I learned from experience was that no matter how bad a situation gets, either your ability to deal with it will get better or the situation itself will get better. And then I came to a realization that I don't need drugs, that God has equipped me with what's necessary to overcome pretty much anything. And that is one of the biggest tools that I use to keep sober until this day.
Before I met Lilo, an actor by the name of Phil Garbarino had the part of C, and I was going in for Mario, and then Jill Greenberg told us unofficially that it was Phil was going to play C, and I was going to play Crazy Mario, and I think she said Joey had the part maybe even before us. Bob knew Joey from Goodfellas, so Joey was going to play Slick, and she told us unofficially that we were those characters.
Now, how did you guys feel knowing that this guy just came out of nowhere?
Well, at first I was on Phil's side.
Right.
At first, so I was like, "This kid, don't worry, Phil." I said, "He doesn't have a shot," but I knew he had a shot.
Right.
And then when I saw him act, I thought he was fantastic. I thought he was fantastic, and I believed that he was from the Bronx, and he had that Bronx accent. I don't know if Lilo put it on or just maybe it's a Yonkers accent that was close to the Bronx, but he also speaks Italian and Spanish and stuff like that, so he was able to do the Bronx accent perfect. I'm from the Bronx, so I know a Bronx accent when I hear it. He had it. After Bronx Tale, we actually did we worked again together. We knew each other's families also from being on set. So I knew his mom and dad. He knew my mom and dad, my brothers. And Lee has an amazing memory, too, because he saw me years later and asked my family by name, which was impressive. But after Bronx Tale, we had done a show called Falcone about, it was a spin-off of Danny Brasco. And it was James Russo, Titus Welliver was in it. It was Bobby Moresco, I think, directed it. Anyway, it was going to be a big series, and I was playing Nicky the Kid. He was playing one of the wise guys, and he was a regular in it. I was going to be, I think, a reoccurring, something like that. But he was a regular, and then they killed him off, and I was surprised that they killed him off. I don't know the real story. You can ask Lee about it. But I remember him not coming in, if we had a 6 or 7 o'clock a.m. call time, he'd come in wired from the night before, not sleeping. He had the black under his eyes, and I knew he was out from the night before, and he looked terrible, and that's when I knew. And then we met out a couple of times. We didn't go out together, but I'd go to a club or an opening for something or an event. And he'd be there, and he was with these kids. I forgot their names. They just were weirdos. I remember this kid, Rob, used to wear these contact lenses. It was just so weird. He had a terrible piece on his head, and they were just all around him. They were obviously enabling him. His family were builders in Yonkers. They had a lot of money, and they did very, very well. His father worked I've never seen anybody work like his father, like a bull. Until he had the heart problem. But his father was a great guy, worked really, really hard. And I remember Lilo always looked great. He always drove cool cars and stuff like that. And then I saw him in a club once. He had a hole in his sweater. He had mangled shoes on, and he asked me for $20 or something like that. And I said, "You're asking me. I should be asking you."
Hugs and smiles during the homecoming this afternoon. 3.5 hours after his release from an upstate prison this morning, former actor Lilo Brancato arrived in Yonkers a free man.
It's a very big day. Thank you all for coming. Just want to spend some time with my family.
When you turn this corner, what goes on in your mind?
Well, a lot of memories, you know. I grew up here. A lot of good memories and more probably bad memories. You know, a lot of guys that I knew from this neighborhood died, drugs, guys I was really, really close to. One guy in particular, my friend Jimmy, they used to call him Aruba. He passed away in 2009, and you know, he used to smoke crack, and I did also, but I wasn't, you know, doing it every day. And he told me, he said, "Lee, you know what? You keep messing with that crack pipe, and one day it's gonna get you." And I remember the day that it got me. It was in this very parking space right here, this parking spot. I was walking into the store, get cigarettes, and the guys parked in his car. They were speaking loud, like they wanted me to hear it. And the guy said, he goes, "Oh, Lilo's a good guy. He never forgot where he came from." So automatically, I'm curious, you know? I've seen him around, I knew who they were. So I walked over to the car, and I remember I looked in the car and said, "Hey guys, how you doing?" You know, and the guys, you know, he's just looking at me and said, "Yeah, I'm all right," you know. And then sitting down, pulls out a crack pipe, and he looks at me. He didn't raise it up so high so we could see it from outside. It was down here, and he said to me, he said, "You interested?" And you know, I knew what that was gonna be. Once I take that first hit of crack, I could be out for, you know, 2 days, a week. And I said, yeah, I'm interested. So I got in the back seat of the car. I remember we took a ride up this street and we came around and the crack pipe was filled with resin. So I said to the guy, I said, no. I said, he's ready to put a rock in there. And I said, no, it's fine. I'll just, he goes, no. He says, if you're gonna do it, you do it the right way. I remember he put a $20 rock inside the pipe. And I remember when I took that hit, that was it. That was it. From that day in July of 2005 until the day I got arrested, December 10th, 2005, I did not miss one day. I smoked crack every single day. And that crack pipe got a real hold on me to the point where I used to be in my room, look at the mirror, and I was a shadow of myself. I was about 135 pounds. I looked like a skeleton. And I would literally, like, you know, so powerless. And I used to look in the mirror crying, like, please, God, please help me, please.
So when you see this neighborhood, does it bring back more bad or more good memories?
I would say more bad memories. But, you know, now that I have reached a moment of clarity, I kind of deal with it a little bit better. And just am so thankful that, you know, that I did make it out and that I am, you know, safe and sound and that I am and that I am in a better place in my life. And, you know, thank God for that, because without him, none of that would have been possible.
The iconic, the working man is a sucker. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my own thoughts, I would probably have to say that I believe the exact opposite, that the working man is not a sucker. My father's, you know, a mason, a builder, and worked really, really hard. And I can tell you this, he's far from a sucker.
Well, my relationship with Lilo was like my relationship with a lot of young studs coming up in New York, getting in the movie game. And, you know, the early 90s to mid 90s, when I was running a big gossip column in the New York Daily News, I was in contact with all those guys, all the young bucks. And, you know, I remember the movie premiere specifically for Bronx Tale because it was a big to-do. It was in Tribeca, you know, Bob De Niro directing. I remember there was a big thing where a lot of people couldn't get in. And, you know, Lilo was about to be crowned as this new actor that was going to make some noise for a long time. And frankly, you left that that screening or the premiere saying this kid fucking held his own with Bob De Niro and Chaz Palminteri, heavyweights. He's going to be around forever. Lito didn't make me an enemy, and I never went after him because you got to understand, as an Italian guy, you know, there's certain movies us Italians see that come on TV, and you put the remote, you can throw the remote away. When you turn on Rocky or Godfather or Goodfellas or Raging Bull or Bronx Tale, Casino even, you're done for the next 2 hours. Right. And when you're one of the stars in those movies, you're like royalty to us. So I would never go out of my way to write something bad about Lito. But it was getting increasingly harder not to, because there were altercations and fights and arguments that that warranted, you know, attention in the columns. There was a club uptown called Rouge that a lot of the mobsters stayed at, and big time guys, Genovese guys, Gambino guys, they all converged there. These are fucking killers. They don't take shit. But Lito would walk in there with the same attitude, like he was running his own show, and those guys wouldn't have it. And again, he's treated a certain way because he's from a certain movie with a certain actor, and they put kid gloves on. But there came a time where he wasn't allowed back in that club, and that's a big blow to a kid like that. I think he has a shot to break in again because he had some talent, and I'm sure he still has some talent. Up until recently, everybody in his town got a second chance. I don't care if you were Mel Gibson and started a race war on the PCH, or Woody Allen, who married his adoptive daughter. I mean, you get second chances in this town, in this business. Right now, the climate in Hollywood is anything you did bad as a man, you're done. What Lilo didn't have anything of a sexual nature to it. So if it's simply a matter of breaking the law, it's a tough spot. But I think he certainly has the ability to come back if he wants to. That's why that movie resounded in all of us, because I've lived a life where sometimes you're not using the talent that God bestowed you. And when you're not using it, things go bad in life, and you can really expect to find yourself on your ass. When you accept that you have this talent that God gave you and you make your living with it, it's truly the gift that God gave you, good things are going to happen. I think Lilo has a gift and got a gift from God. He fucked his life up, but I don't think that gift left him. And I think there's somebody out there that's going to put their hand out and allow him back into the scene.
Well, you know, when you start working in the film and TV business and make a little bit of money, you know, for me, I lived at home with my parents, went to boarding school. I was lived in a sort of insulated bubble, and never really had to worry too much about money, never had to worry about buying stuff. So I never had a lot of cash on hand, never had a bank account or anything like that. And when I started working a lot in New York City, it's not just being recognizable or being the new hot guy or whatever they call it, but it's all of a sudden having, you know, being 18 or 19 and having $150,000 cash in your bank account.
Right.
I mean,
Which could have been at that point, that's like 10 million.
Right. And you're working on jobs, you know, and you're making 50 here, 75, 100. And it's just growing in your bank account. And really, you know, when you have that kind of cash, you never had that kind of cash before, you know, I just didn't see there was no limit to what I could do, you know. So, you know, that and sort of the access, really it's the money that creates the access. And so the drugs and, you know, all that stuff becomes very available because you're supplying the drugs and the alcohol for a lot of the friends. So they'll be finding the stuff for you because you're footing the bill.
Right.
And it's, you know, it's constant and never ending.
Solely, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask the question. It's probably the most important question of this whole documentary. Do you feel like you got away with murder?
Well, I've always taken full responsibility for how my addiction and my, you know, decision-making made a contribution in the death of the heroic police officer. But with that being said, I don't feel that I was directly responsible for the death. So therefore, no, I don't think I was or got away with murder.
What were your initial thoughts when you first heard about the whole incident?
Before we even knew who it was, you know, it was another cop murder.
Were you working the night off or no?
I was off that night,
Okay.
actually. But a few weeks or months prior, we had another officer who was killed. I think it was Officer Dylan Stewart. Yeah, immediately, just the initial reports to have another officer killed. Any officer killed struck us, but 2 almost back to back. And then when we heard who it was, someone kind of privileged who probably had a lot going for them, that struck an even deeper nerve in pretty much all of us.
What was the, if you can remember, what was the initial reaction around the precinct when around the funeral time or right after it happened?
Everyone, in general, was mad, livid. Not just because of what happened, but again, because of who it was and that he was what we viewed as a privileged person. How could this have happened? How could he have been involved? And kind of also a feeling of like almost being backstabbed because I think in general, a lot of us we know him from Bronx Tale.
Right.
So we liked the movie, we liked him. I talked to a few today actually about this. And
what were their thoughts?
It's like it was yesterday.
Really?
He's a scumbag, he's a perp, he's a piece of shit. He should still be in jail, he should have got the death penalty, so on and so forth. I've yet to find anyone in the NYPD who has anything positive to say about him.
Do you think he deserves a second chance? If not, why?
I don't, and I don't because I do believe in second chances, but for me, this was too egregious to deserve a second chance. And from interviews I saw with people who used to work with him, I think Chaz Palminteri, I think I've seen a few interviews with him back then, where he said that he had heard he'd been involved in drug activity and so on, and he tried to steer him clear, and he told him this is going to lead to trouble. So it sounded like there were probably people around him who tried to steer him clear from that bad element he was getting into, and he didn't listen. And this things like this happen when you're involved in that activity. And to me, this is something that's not worthy of a second chance.
Why did you think it was important to do this documentary from a cop side of things?
I figured the public just needs to know what the cops feel, in particular NYPD cops, that the feeling hasn't changed. I hate to use the word hate, but I'm gonna use the word hate. Everyone that I know at NYPD, you mentioned Brancato's name, they hate him. Still consider him a scumbag, piece of shit, worthless, and wouldn't see any movie or project with him in it. And I felt it was just important to make that known.
Well, this is St. Anne's Church. This is where I did my first communion back in 1984. It's where I did my confirmation in 1990. I didn't grow up too far from here, maybe like 2 minutes down the street. And, this church has a lot of meaning to me. I mean, it's like, part of my childhood. It's part of who I am. And, and really only after I was incarcerated did I really realize the importance of having God in your life, because of the bad mistakes and the choices that I made in my life and what they resulted in. A lot of people left my side. A lot of people that were near and dear to me, people that I loved, and just weren't there for me. Not everyone. But one person who never left my side was God. He was always there. And, I now know, because of what I went through and the changes in my life of who I was and then who I became the day that I was released. Funny how life works itself out because, 25 years later at least, right next door to this church, which is part of this church, where they have parties and stuff, is where I attend Narcotics Anonymous meetings. God does exist. And, this is why, I try to go to church as much as possible. And, thank God every day of my life. Before I do anything, I pray for at least 10 minutes to thank Him for giving me the strength to become the person that I am today. I owe it all to Him. So, you know, here I am.
I feel as though he got the right amount of time just because he did do a robbery. There was a weapon involved. And knowing the laws and actually having an ex-boyfriend who went to jail for the same thing, that's what he got. He got 10 years, he'd do 85% of his time. And I feel as though that was fair.
It's so easy to get bored. And so then the next thing is, well, what's next? I've got everything. Like, what else is there? And so drugs and alcohol and whatever comes into the picture inevitably. And it almost always, I mean, it's so hard to navigate yourself through that world.
I think that Lilo is a great artist, and I want him to keep working and you know, at the end of the day, I think it does put a bit of a shadow over all the amazing work that he has done.
Somebody who's watching this documentary and didn't know Lilo, or don't know him obviously personally, or don't know much about him, what would you like them to know about him that maybe somebody wouldn't know?
That he's a different person. He's dedicated to his, you know, to his job and his career, and that he's a good kid. He's a really good kid. He got a great heart, you know. What he did, whatever happened to him, it was from the drugs, nothing else.
Thank you.